Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. We are going to dive into some EQing today. I have a session pulled up here and I have some vocal tracks here. I'm going to go ahead and isolate the main vocal track here, and we're going to be talking a little bit about EQ. So let's go ahead and slap on an EQ. Just going to throw it on your insert here. We'll do this one. Yeah, why not? So let's listen to it before we start EQing, right? So I have a little section highlighted here, and then I have it loop playing. So you can actually right click this button right here and you can choose loop. That way, when you're EQing, the track that you have selected, or the section rather, continues to play. So let's go ahead and highlight a little section. And then hit play.
When in walked a man with a gun in his hand, and he was looking for you know who. He said, "Hey there, fellow with the hair colored yellow, what you trying to prove?"
All right, so we got a nice vocal track. You could tell it sounds really good. Capturing it at the source. Always make sure that your recordings are always the best take. Never settle for an okay take. Always try to get the best take you can. So let's go ahead and select that.
When in walked a man with a gun in his hand, and he was looking for...
So an important thing to note about an EQ is there's different styles. There's little miniature ones where you can control 2 bands. There's 4 bands. This is a 6 band. As you can see, there's 6 little areas that you can grab and kind of move around and things like that. So an EQ is actually a frequency booster that utilizes, if you see here, these are your frequencies, right? And then this is how much gain. So you got to be careful with EQs. Whenever you EQ something, you have to keep in mind that you could still potentially clip, because you're boosting frequencies, you're gaining up the frequency or cutting the frequency. And so for a vocal, I always start off with a high pass filter. That's just how I usually do it. So I roll about 75-ish, I guess you could. And so let's hear what that sounds like already.
When in walked a man with a gun in his hand, and he was looking for you know who. He said, "Hey there, fellow with the hair colored yellow, what you trying to prove?"
See?
And I'm a man who cares.
So you basically
Be all for you.
So you basically want to make the EQ, you want to make your track sound good, right? You don't need a lot of low end in the vocals. And so I always do a high pass filter here. For this next one, I always try to do a healthy balance between subtractive and additive EQ. I always like to sweep and find any harsh frequencies. And when I do that, I tend to dip out where it tends to be harsh. So for example,
when in walked a man with a gun in his hand, and he was looking for you know who. He said, "Hey there, fellow with the hair colored yellow, what you trying to prove? 'Cause that's my woman there, and I'm a man who cares, and it's my..."
So you could tell we're kind of at 151. So anywhere from 2 to 500 is going to be where it's going to be kind of muddy. So you can actually play around between 1 to 500 and see what gives you the most clarity.
When in walked a man with a gun in his hand, and he was looking for you know who. He said, "Hey there, fellow with the hair colored yellow, what you trying to prove? 'Cause that's my woman there, and I'm a man who..."
Also, another thing to keep in mind is your EQ curves, they don't have to be crazy. I know it's very tempting to go in and make your EQ graph look really nuts and looks like you're doing so many different things, but slight changes. You can go a long way with slight changes. And that's basically how I like to tackle EQ. So let's go ahead and see what
When
this
in
guy.
walked a man with a gun in his hand, and he was looking for you know who. He said, "Hey there, fellow with the hair colored yellow, what you trying to prove? 'Cause that's my woman there, and I'm a man who cares, and it's might be all for you." Excuse me. When in walked a man with a gun in his hand, and he was looking for you know who. He said, "Hey there, fella."
All right, so let's go ahead and play that back and then bypass it so we can check our progress. So I'll go ahead and bypass it. So what you're about to hear is a normal vocal.
When in walked a man with a gun in his hand, and he was looking for you know who. He said, "Hey there, fellow with the hair colored yellow."
So already it's got some of the mud taken out. It's a little more clear. Another step you can do is you could boost a little bit, and it's always nice to kind of boost between 1 to 2K. So let's go ahead and see what we can do here.
When in walked a man with a gun in his hand, and he was looking for you know who. He said, "Hey there, fellow with the hair colored yellow, what you trying to prove? 'Cause that's my woman there, and I'm a man who cares, and it's might be all for you." Excuse me. When in walked a man with a gun in his hand.
So I kind of like the way that sounds. Boosting between 1 to 2K. I mean, these are kind of your mid frequencies, and there's a lot of your vocal dynamics can come from that range. So there's nothing wrong with a little bit of boost. You don't want to go too crazy. You start hearing noticeable changes around 3 dB, and so anywhere between like 2 to 3.
When in walked a man with a gun in his hand, and he was looking for you know who. He said, "Hey there, fellow with the hair colored yellow."
And then for even more kind of clarity and top end, you can do a shelf here for highs. And I usually like to start around 8K to see what that sounds like. And this is at 2 dB.
When in walked a man with a gun in his hand, and he was looking for you know who. He said, "Hey there, fellow with the hair colored yellow, what you trying to prove? 'Cause that's my woman there, and I'm a..."
And that's basically how you tackle an EQ. So you never want to go too crazy with your reductions. You never want to go too crazy with your boosts. Think of it as sculpting, right? You want to make little modifications, and eventually you'll get to where your track needs to be. Always mix with your ears. Don't ever look at an EQ graph and then try to copy it. Always mix with your ears. I mean, you could start with a preset if you'd like, and then work around that preset. But this is basically how you would EQ. So I guess some key takeaways here is: 1, be careful when cutting or boosting, because you can clip your track. Remember, this is an amplifier in a sense. You're gaining the frequency up, or gaining the frequency down, and so be mindful of that. Don't clip your tracks because of the processing. Have a healthy balance. Number 2, have a healthy balance with EQ. There's a war saying that it's supposed to be additive, it's supposed to be subtractive, but the reality is you want a healthy balance of both. Don't be afraid to add. Don't be afraid to subtract, but do it when it makes sense. If you have a vocal track, cut out some of the bottom end. You don't need a lot of bottom end in your vocals. Cutting out that bottom end will make your kick drums, and it'll make your bass guitar stand out more. Having that 1 to 2K frequency and that 8 to 10K frequency kind of attenuated and boosted will make your vocal pop out in the mix and have more clarity versus mud. And I hope that has helped. This little knob right here, this is good to pay attention to as well, because sometimes when you're adding, you can start sending more signal to that track because you're boosting some frequencies, and this is a good way to kind of bring it down. And so what I always do is I bypass it, see what level I'm at, engage the processing, and then match that level. That way you keep the effect that you created within your EQ settings while maintaining that original signal level. Again, I hope this was super helpful. EQ is all about playing around. Do some test recordings with your own vocal and just test it out. Have fun with it. Test out some presets even. And then with those presets, kind of see what they're doing with that EQ curve. And then just kind of take notes from that. And then start over and start messing around and seeing what sounds good, or hearing rather what sounds good. But I hope this was super helpful. And hey, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and support the channel so we can make more content like this. Again, my name is Christian. Thank you so much for checking out the channel, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.